But before we get there, I wanted to talk about the book. The book is called When Dawn Comes with Wings. So start for me at the title. What inspired you for the title, but also how and why did you end up putting this book together?
Okay.
Amazing book, by the way. Amazing book. I'm not going to get the chance to say it once she start going on, but yeah, amazing book. Everyone should get one. It's incredible. But yeah, talk to me about the book.
Thank you. It's very kind of you to say. How did it come together? It was one of those things where just lots of things happen at the same time, but they just
converge.
Yeah, they converge. And they converged at a time when I suppose I had the time to write the book. I was just writing more, and I was writing about my experiences. It gave me a lot of time to reflect as well. I was writing about my experiences, both past and present, and how I was feeling and my emotions. I just started writing a lot because although with regards to cognitive recovery, it took some time, in the space in between, like, I could still use my mind. Even in the time after the seizures, like, I could still use my mind, even though it might not be as coherent like what I was writing at that time. But yeah, and honestly, I had just written so many poems that I was like, I might as well make it something. And that was why I decided to write the book. And then as I continued writing, because at first I didn't know what it would be about. I just knew that I wanted it to follow a story. And then as I continued writing, I was just like, you know what? This book, as it is now, is the journey of how I got from a dark place to finding hope, essentially, to finding a hopeful base. So I wrote it, but the reason that I decided to share it is because I was just thinking, if it can help one person feel seen or heard or not alone in their experiences, if they've had a similar experience of being in a dark place and like searching for hope, then it's worth it if it reaches one person.
100%. 100%. 3, 2, 1. Hello. I'll take that. Hello. Welcome to another episode of the Jeoffrey Sarpong podcast. Today I'm here with Rebecca. Rebecca, how are you?
I am good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing very well.
Good.
Good. I'm very much excited for this. So obviously, a little background on where we met. So we met at a Morocco-bound poetry open mic. I remember seeing you go up and perform and just thinking, wow, that's amazing. And we'll get way more into my absolute love and obsession for your poetry. But yeah, so from that, obviously, I see in those that you have a poetry book out. It's called When Dawn Comes with Wings. Beautiful title. And yes, I thought I'd get here today to speak about it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's honestly such a pleasure. So thank you for inviting me.
It's absolutely my pleasure to be here, also to interview you. So, okay. So let's start from the beginning. So in obviously this book, one of the last poems is called an ode to poetry. You have the line, I'm going to read it quickly. It says, for what is poetry if not a reflection of life's journeys, truths, and human perception? Can you share what poetry means to you? Let's start there. What does poetry mean to you?
When you first say poetry, to me, honestly, my mind first goes to everything. It's in everything. It's everywhere. I know it sounds kind of cheesy to say maybe, but I genuinely see it as just woven into the fabric of life itself, because it's just like, it's in body language. It's in words spoken, in words unspoken. It's, I don't know, it's like energy. It's in nature. It's an inspiration. The fact that you can read something and it evokes so much emotion in you, or you can listen to something, say if it's spoken word, and you can feel that emotion. Again, as I said, I think it's just energy, and it's also kind of a connector. It sort of connects people too, because like through those emotions that are conveyed in poetry, you kind of realize that, yeah, we are connected. The human experience is a shared one. It's not an individual one. And so poetry for me, I would say, is energy. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I'm sorry for that.
Say it's energy. It's always emotion.
I think the question I had too, and I think I was so excited. I was like, you're just saying so much good stuff. So you mentioned energy, you mentioned it's everything, you mentioned it's in nature too. Have you always been able to tap into that? Have you always understood that instinct? Have you always got that straight away, or was it something you've had to grow and kind of accept?
I think I've always had a fascination with nature. And to be honest, like when I reflect, I am just sort of like, I never grew up writing or writing poetry, at least. It wasn't something that was innate in me. So no, I haven't always had that thing, but I have been on a journey of self-reflection. And I think through going through that journey, becoming more self-aware, it's just unlocked this sort of new perspective and finding that inspiration. And so I started writing poetry during lockdown. And since then, I went to my first spoken word event, and since then I've just been hooked on poetry. I'm going to listen to poetry. I'm performing. It's just such an important part of my life now, and I'm really grateful that I found that space. So yeah.
I agree. I think similar for me actually. Weirdly enough, I really started getting into poetry more during lockdown. I think obviously because you're stuck at home and you want to express some form of anger or angst to the people that you're with, or maybe you just want to write about love, like all poets.
Was that you?
That's sweet. I didn't write about love, but no, it was it's such an amazing experience for me because it is like that kind of understanding, that understanding about the fact that you can do this. And I think we're all exposed to poetry on the periphery of the everyday lives, but I think it's something that you attribute to other people to put up on a pedestal. When you start doing it yourself and start seeing that actually it's not that hard. And it's obviously difficult to access these emotions and find the rhythm and the rhyme and the words, but that's all that takes is just practice, And then, I started to go on that, and then it became a thing where I could express myself through this avenue. And that is something I think I'll hold for the rest of my life, just the ability to express, and not, kind of thing that changed the course of my life, because it's like, I now see when things happen to me, I'm more calm about it because I'm like, oh, this is just good content. This is just stuff that I can use for poetry later on. Talk to me a little bit more about your journey. You mentioned, obviously, we've talked about it before, but I would love you to get more into depth about it too. What was your journey into poetry? What was it like at the beginning, and how did it, move course until where you start to write this book?
Yeah, honestly, it was a very long journey.
Yeah, I mean,
years, so many years. And I think it's never something that I expected to do, let alone love. Because for the longest time, poetry for me was like Shakespeare, or well, no shade on Shakespeare, obviously, but it was like Shakespeare and people from the 1800s and poems that I'd studied in GCSE English literature, that sort of thing. And I didn't actually realize that there was a world where poetry exists in a modern context until, I started writing myself, but mostly until I found the spoken word scene and met lots of other poets. And I was like, this is actually something that quite a lot of people do. It's really refreshing. It was so refreshing to realize that and just to be in that space. But in terms of where the journey started, I think I've always been a person who thinks quite deeply. and all the way through my childhood as well. And when I got my first laptop, just when I was doing my A levels, and I got a laptop that had a webcam, and I just started video journaling, and it was I was quite shy as a child, and I feel like I found it quite difficult to express certain emotions to others. I think I've always been kind of a people pleaser, but also just I don't like to. I feel like if I'm feeling like sad or
I don't want to burden someone else.
exactly,
Yeah.
I don't want to burden someone else. So, I used to make video journals whenever I was going through something that was difficult. When I was 16, admittedly, that was kind of like, this boy is, how dare they? Or that sort of thing.
It's all beautiful art at the end of the day. So, shout out to 16-year-old.
But no, I used to make video journals just talking to myself about what's going on in my life, and that served as a substitute for me talking to somebody else about it. And somehow just seeing myself in front of me, just as I said, I used to just record them, and I still have all of those recordings, and it's quite interesting to watch back and see the evolution of how I think. But anyway, I used to just record them, and I found that it gave me a sense of clarity to talk through my emotions. And I think in hindsight, that probably helped me to be able to express my emotions and what I was thinking. Well, just to be able to express and to vocalize them.
Oh, you think that was?
Why do I think that was?
Yeah.
I think sometimes my mind is a very cluttered place, and yeah, I think when you talk about things, it focuses your thoughts on one thing at a time.
Yeah.
Whereas when it's in your mind,
It's like everywhere.
exactly, it's everywhere. Like just different thoughts get lost in different places. Whereas, yeah, when you're talking about it, you're focusing on one thing at a time. And then obviously you might say something and then it leads to something else. But again, like you're speaking about things and referring to them one thing at a time. So I think that maybe that's why it helped me. But yeah, I continued that practice all the way through sixth form, through university. I didn't really have the time to make like sometimes sometimes the video recordings were like half an hour.
Oh, wow. That's a soliloquy.
It's long, yeah, literally a soliloquy. So at university, I didn't really have I didn't have the time to do that all the time. But then I was still going through some difficult things. So at university I still did it sometimes if things were like quite bad, but I would just write down my thoughts and again still express them. And I went through some quite difficult things, and I find when I go through difficult things, sometimes it's painful to express or talk about. So I used to write about the things I'd been through using metaphors, and sometimes even using pronouns that weren't my own, or just trying to distance myself, write as a different person about those emotions and what I'd been through.
For the objective view.
Yeah, just from a different view. Or, as I said, just like very metaphorical if it's not from a completely different view. And I used to call it rhythmic prose because it was a bit rhythmic, but I was like, it's not poetry. Like, it didn't even cross my mind that it could be poetry. I was like, yeah, it's just prose. Like, that's what it is. And so yeah. And that practice continued throughout university and afterwards as well. So I was doing both of them. And then during lockdown, Yeah, one of my best friends from university studied English literature, and she did spoken word at university. So I'd been to watch her. I studied science, so I did not consider myself a creative person at all. Like, I did biomedical science, I did sciences for my A levels and maths, and I was like, yeah, not creative at all.
Did you read at all, or were you interested in literature?
No.
Really? Oh my god!
Like, literally, no. Beyond, I used to read a lot when I was a teenager, but then GCSE English literature killed it for me. Like,
What are we doing?
honestly, and then I did not read another book for leisure until maybe about 2 years ago, which is crazy.
Oh, and now you have a book yourself.
No, it is crazy. So I wasn't interested in literature at all. But yeah, like, I brought up my friend because that was my first exposure to spoken word in general. But she actually just suggested to me, because she knew we lived together, so she knew that I like did my video recordings and like my writing and all journaling, or all the rhythmic prose, whatever kind of thing.
She coordinates her.
So she knew that I did all of that, and she just suggested that I write a poem, and so I wrote a poem, and the first one I wrote is in my book. It's called Tiptoe. The second one that I wrote is in my book. It's about my dad and just a shared experience that we had going to the same place, but 50 years apart, and which was cool. And yeah, with regards to spoken word, I am a huge Beyonce fan. And
Go behind.
I know, no. Yeah, she's just amazing. But I'd seen her visual album Lemonade, and then Black as King came out during the pandemic as well. And yeah, there's poetry in between the songs, and I hadn't even acutely thought of it as a poetry, but I think, I don't know, maybe I saw it in the credits or something. I realized that there was a poet that a British poet who helped her to write the poetry for both of those digital albums. Yeah. Called Warsaw Shire. And so I was looking at some of her poems, and I was like, this is so cool. Like, she's amazing as well. But I was looking at some of her poems on YouTube and her performing them, and then the algorithm just connected me to other poems. And then I was just reminded again of the fact that spoken word was a thing. And I saw these amazing spoken word poets just performing on YouTube videos. And I was kind of like, I think I could do that. And only, not in a cocky way at all, but just because I love public speaking. I'd had the opportunity at work to do to run some workshops for A-level students that were studying STEM subjects, and just running workshops for them. And I loved it. And then I was writing poetry. So then I was like, combining the two, I think it would be something that I might enjoy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just went on Eventbrite, booked a spoken word event, and I went, and I'd written a spoken word poem for it, and I was so nervous.
What was the event?
It was at the Morocco which is where you were.
But no, it was written in the stars.
Stars aligned.
Loved it for
I think it was January 2023.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my first spoken word performance, and I got really good feedback. The clicking, all of that was new to me. So
I want to link it there for a second, because I think that experience is so unique that I want to give people an insight into what that's like. So before you talk to me about the time before you go up on stage, obviously you might have picked a poem that you want to perform.
Yeah.
What's going through your head? What is it like when you're on stage? What is it like when you just come off? Talk me through that experience.
Yeah. I think for me it's evolved because I've done it a few more times now. At the beginning, though, I always feel nervous because there is something inside you, or at least inside me, that's like, what if people don't like it?
Yeah.
Like, what if it only makes sense to me? Like, it's just,
What if I mess up?
what if I mess up? Exactly. And what if it's not received well? So, because words can have so many meanings, and so you just don't know. Or at least for me, I'm like, I just don't know. I just don't know what's going to happen. And especially the first time that I performed, I had no idea what it was going to feel like, what it's going to be like. So when I went up, I was super nervous. I was like not really making that much eye contact with the audience at the beginning because I was like, I don't want to see it if they don't like it. Like if I didn't see it, it didn't happen. So yeah, and then I started reading it, and then you get. I mean, I love the fact that spoken word is so interactive. It's like a group up. That looks like a
Someone just
exactly. And then I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm hearing some clicks. I think that's a good sign. And then started looking up from my phone a bit more. And then I just got really into it. And I think when you get in, it's like a zone. When you get in the zone, or in the flow of it, the flow probably is a better word to say. It's just so liberating. It's so liberating, and I just loved it.
100%. I think I've talked about this before. I think the Wi-Fi is so liberating about it is because once you're in that moment, when you're performing, you really are, like we talked about before, you really are saying things that you probably never thought you would say to an audience.
Yeah.
And it's being received, the energy in that room, like give and take. You're saying things that are like deep and precious to you, but you'll see it's being so widely received with open arms, and the clicking thing, you're like,
yeah,
you just feel almost seen in that moment. You feel almost heard, literally, both at the same time.
Yeah.
It's fascinating, right?
No, it really is. And I love the fact that you said that you just, the back and forth. It really is. Like, you feel the energy of the audience as well, as they feel the energy from what you're saying as well. It resonates with them, and their response resonates with you too. So it is like a two-way thing. And it's such a beautiful thing to experience. And that's why I love spoken word events. The energies or the atmosphere is just electric.
It's incredible.
So, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's perfect. And I think it's, I want to definitely move and get onto where the difference between spoken word and written language, as we've talked about before. I think that those two dichotomy is so fascinating. I definitely want to spend some more time on there. But before we get there, I wanted to talk about the book. The book is called When Dawn Comes with Rains. So start for me at the title. What inspired you for the title, but also how and why did you end up putting this book together?
Okay.
Amazing book, by the way. Amazing book. I'm not going to get the chance to say once she start going on, but yeah, amazing book. Everyone should get one. It's incredible. But yeah, talk to me about the book.
Thank you. It's very kind of you to say. How did it come together? It was one of those things where just lots of things happen at the same time, and they just
converge.
Yeah, they converge. And they converged at a time when I suppose I had the time to write the book. So for context, I have epilepsy. So at the end of 2022, yes. So time is just like
that whole 4 years is just completely avoided.
Yeah, literally. At the end of 2022, my health just took a turn. My epilepsy was controlled, and then I don't know what happened, but I think I also kind of burnt out. But anyway, it just wasn't controlled anymore, and so yeah, that was very difficult. I just started a new job at the time, and I just couldn't hit the mark, and I didn't pass my probation, so I was out of work, and my health was not in a good way. And my neurologist said I needed to change my medications, and that process can be very up and down. Things tend to get worse before they get better. So I decided, I mean, I was very lucky, I was living at home. So I decided I'm going to take some time to heal, do this medication transition, and then go back into work afterwards, because when you have a seizure, or with the seizures that I had, I was out of it for like 2 weeks. As in, you're out of it for a few minutes, but then like in terms of just the cognitive recovery, it took a while for me. So that was sort of what put me in a position where I had a lot more time on my hands. But then I don't like doing nothing just as a person. I just like twiddle my thumbs. I just don't like it. Yeah. So I was just writing more, and I was writing about my experiences. It gave me a lot of time to reflect as well. I was writing about my experiences, both past and present, and how I was feeling and my emotions. I just started writing a lot because although with regards to cognitive recovery, it took some time, in the space in between, like, I could still use my mind. Even in the time after the seizures, like, I could still use my mind, even though it might not be as coherent like what I was writing at that time. But yeah, and honestly, I had just written so many poems that I was like, I might as well make it something. And that was why I decided to write the book. And then as I continued writing, because at first I didn't know what it would be about. I just knew that I wanted it to follow a story. And then as I continued writing, I was just like, you know what? This book, as it is now, is the journey of how I got from a dark place to finding hope, essentially, to finding a hopeful base. So I wrote it, but the reason that I decided to share it is because I was just thinking, if it can help one person feel seen or heard or not alone in their experiences, if they've had a similar experience of being in a dark place and like searching for hope, then it's worth it if it reaches one person.
100%. 100%.
So yeah, that's kind of how it came about. And with regards to the titles,
Dawn comes with wings.
when dawn comes with wings, I went through so many different title ideas. The first one was the Cocoon Chronicles, because I was like, I'm pretty much in a cocoon phase of my life and this is chronicling it. But it didn't feel right. And then I was like, maybe I just go for something totally different. I was going to go for the Owl and the Willow. I don't know why. Like, I was like, it sounds cool. But then I kind of was like, I don't want to give it a title too early, because I don't want to then gear all of my poems towards the title.
And even the themes are on title, right?
Exactly, because I wanted it to follow like its own authentic journey, and then the title reflects that journey rather than making the journey veer towards the title. So yeah, when dawn comes with wings, I literally just saw a psalm, which was Psalm 139, verse 9, which is
It's in the book. So now I'm trying to remember it. It's in the book.
if I rise on the wings of dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea,
That's beautiful, yeah.
even there your hand will guide me, your right hand will hold me fast. That's amazing. And that is the inspiration for the titles. And I just, as soon as I read that, I was like, this is it. Like, it just is one of those moments where you're like, this,
Yeah.
this is the one. The one.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay, I got so many questions. You see me just scribbling away because I don't want to forget my questions. First off, yeah, absolutely incredible. I think it's such an incredible inspiration that you got to write this book. I can definitely tell. I think I have this theory that artists, we roam the world and we just wait for the muse to hit us. And I think that's what that was. The muse hit you at the right time, where you were able to turn that experience you're going through into words. And we do it so often, we don't know how magical that is. Like, it is really magical to be able to take that experience you're going through and you do the section into different parts, and then have it all kind of connect. I think the reason why I really like this poetry book as a poet is because it touches on all the feelings that I have too. And I think that's what is so universal. I think that feeling of feeling lost and finding yourself, and then the emotions that you have to go through while you're doing that. And I think, I think that's what it makes such a beautiful book, because it's also like you can read it even if you're not a poet, you can still read it and see an experience that you've gone through really like sharply described, and you use many different techniques to do it. You use nature, but you also use your own internal emotions, and like use internal emotions maybe as a canvas, emotions as a canvas to paint this picture you're painting. Each different poem, is different, but it also kind of sometimes will kind of like cascade into each other, because you're building, especially in a section, you're building a story, you're building an image of like a situation you're going through, an emotion you're going through, trying to paint that. I think that's so amazing. I think that's so brilliant, because I think every poet has a thing where they have a feeling they don't want to describe. And maybe it's a thing where that's news 101. Every poet wants to describe feelings. It's true, though. It's so fact. It's the most. But that's all we do. We just want to describe our feelings. We just, if you lift the toys of eyes, all we do is just sit there describing how we felt. But I think sometimes it's hard for us to find or even validate our own like way of doing it, right? Because we do it, we're like, oh, this is how I feel, but I don't know if this is exactly how I feel. But it's so interesting when you see another poet do it. That's exactly how I feel. I said, how did she know? How did she know that feeling that I had? How did she know when I felt sky, I had to turn the skies and like how? But then, it's because they going through a very similar thing, and maybe because you understand the way they say it, and it's because it's not you, and it's someone else.
Yeah.
You see that as actually a real thing.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful.
It really is. And honestly, I think this is one thing I love about poetry too, is that you can really feel seen in other people's poetry as well. And I do think human emotion is a universal currency. It's something that we all exchange. It's something that we all experience. I mean, obviously, everybody goes through different things and are in different situations and different circumstances and stuff. But I think the emotions that arise from what you experience, although to varying intensities, obviously, are largely quite similar. And everybody experiences that. And I think we can all connect with each other on that kind of level too. So it is really beautiful when you read something or listen to something that someone else has written, and as I said, you feel seen or heard in what they've said. It makes you realize that we are a bit more connected than you might think.
100%. And you spoke of something that's interesting. I want to to move into a tangent there. You mentioned human emotions as a currency. Look into yourself. What particular emotions or themes do you find keep coming back? You keep coming back to in your poetry, or you find difficult to write about in your poetry?
I think I write a lot about, I write about fear.
Mm-hmm.
I write about uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of a dominant factor in my life at the moment, because I don't know what my future's going to look like. So it's kind of like fear of the future. I sometimes write about love. But to be honest, if I really think about it, a lot of my poetry at the moment is kind of centered around uncertainty and trying to overcome uncertainty, fear, and also the fact that sometimes you can hold yourself back.
Okay.
And I'm trying to not be the barrier between me and what I could potentially do.
That's so. I related a lot, actually. You read the poem that I wrote today, and it was about a lot about those topics, those themes, about uncertainty, about fear, about how you deal with that while you're going through it. Like, I think there's also a thing about knowing you're going to be okay, but not having actually got there yet.
Yeah.
And then it's weird because you're heading in the right place, you know it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Because you made the decisions, you made that kind of affirmation within yourself, but the fear and anxiety is still there.
Yeah.
Because you're not there yet. And that's the difficult thing to go through. And I think, I think I definitely agree with that. It's a prevalent thing in my poetry too. What would you do? What would you say to someone who's going through that also? How would you advise them to wade the waters? I know you're also figuring it out, but you're a poet. So this is what you do.
How would I advise them? I'll start by saying I don't always practice what I preach. I would say, and I know this messaging is sort of everywhere, but do it scared. I was having a conversation with my friend literally like a couple of days ago, and we were talking about the comfort zone, and he was saying that sorry. He was saying that he thinks that in order to leave and stay out the comfort zone, so it's not just about leaving, but that's good. You just like stuff up a second, and like, okay, I'm gonna come back now. But actually staying outside the comfort zone, he thinks you need to embody the version of yourself that would exist outside the comfort zone. And I think that's a really interesting point. And it reminded me actually, so I will say as well, another thing that I write quite a lot about is faith. So my faith is really important to me, and it's very much a guiding factor in my life. And it reminded me of a Bible verse, which is 1 Corinthians 15, I think 35 onwards, which basically talks about the fact that you can sow a seed, but in order for the seed to grow, it needs to die to itself. And then it forms and it grows, and it's a new body. And it's saying that God gives the body for the season of growth. But the growth does not look like what was sown. It's something different. And so for me, when I think about leaving the comfort zone or just growth in general, because I do think that the distance between you and the you of your dreams or what you want to achieve is often growth. I just think that if I have faith that the seeds that I sow will grow into something beautiful, I think you've just got to make that leap and do it scared and trust that, God will provide you, equip you to be able to operate outside the comfort zone, essentially. So my advice would just be have faith, do it scared, and be open to learning, because there is no progress without making mistakes.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think from my experience also, it's been one of kind of always figuring out I could do more than I even thought I could, because I'd given myself the space to actually try it. Like I look at poetry, for example, me turning up at that event place and performing. Like I was scared, like I was very much scared, but like you said, I did it scared because I wanted to, I think kind of back to what you said, I wanted to be that version of myself that did the poetry, and I was like, okay, I'm here, who's scared and hasn't done it, and I want to be there, who is scared and has done it. So like, there's only one thing I can do to get there is just doing it. And by doing it multiple times, is fascinating too, because you start to reveal yourself to yourself.
Yeah. No,
I can do this. What else can I do?
Exactly. It's so true. And this is what I mean about not being a barrier to yourself. Like, you need to give yourself the chance to explore what you could do. And like you said, the only way to do that is to just do something, try it and see what happens. Can I ask what motivated you to perform poetry for the first time?
Of course. Trying to think back. I think I've always been interested in poetry, some form of. I think hip hop has got me very like lyrical, miracle kind of. I like people. I like people who like use like loads of good lyricism in their things. So I think I always looked at hip hop as a form of poetry, and then well, I wrote for a long time, and then like I said, from COVID or something, but I never really went out and performed. For me, the barrier in my mind was, oh, like this is a thing I do, and I'm like, okay, do it in this small form because I know that I am no one will judge me if I'm writing to myself, so no one will judge me. But if I now perform it, it's now I give it to the people, and now the people can judge me. And I think again, coming back to that thing of being perceived, like we were talking about before, I think me being perceived in front of all these people, like they'll try to understand me, as oh, you're never gonna get me anyway. So that was a whole kind of internal thing, and to get over that and to let go a little bit, um, is why I decided to perform. Because I was like, you know what, like these are all in your head. These are theories and hypotheses in your head. Like they don't mean anything. Try it. Go outside, perform, and I did. And then the feeling I got, and also like, it's threefold. First, you're there, like I was mentioning, and you're sitting there thinking, "Oh my god, I'm scared." Then you see people performing, and you're like, "Oh my god, they're really good." So it gives a little bit of anxiety, but also like they just perform something really personal to them. You see that, and then you go up, and because of the mood and the vibe of the atmosphere of the room, you feel comfortable to share that. Then afterwards, they're like, "I loved your poem," and then that's a third blow. You're like, "Oh my god, like this experience was nothing like I could have expected," because very rarely do you find people like allowing you to open up, creating a space for you to open up, hearing you out when you open up, and then like affirming you, saying that was incredible, you did that really well. And so that, I think since then, that experience was something I've always tried to, go back to, and now I work there because I fix things like I couldn't leave. So I was like, oh, fine. But actually, you mentioned something interesting in what you were speaking about, also like the two places of like who you are now and who you want to be. I wanted to talk a little bit more about that too. What the question is, like simply, well, how do you navigate the space between who you are and who you aspire to be? But also, I've also often noticed that who we aspire to be always moves forward as we go closer. So how do you also navigate that?
Yeah, honestly, that's a very good question. And I want to point out, because if you had asked me what I aspire to do, then I would have been like, roadmap. I would have been like, A, B, work backwards from B. What's the route? Follow that. If there's a diversion, I know where B is. I'm going to follow like a different route to B. But exactly. But when it's who you aspire to be, for me, that's not necessarily about what you've achieved. I think who you aspire to be embodies qualities, characteristics, ambitions, that sort of thing. And that's much harder to pin down as something. And like you said, the goalpost is always moving, because the more experiences that you have, the more, because you don't know what you don't know. And the more experience...
It's like me saying why is an expression, yeah. So true.
So, you don't know what you don't know. So the more experiences that you have, the more you're like, actually, I want to embody this, or that kind of, or I want to have this, not necessarily have this characteristic, but, just have this quality, or that sort of thing. So, in terms of navigating that space, I don't think there's a map for it. I think that it's very much the kind of thing that, you can say to yourself, this is who I think I want to be, and have that in mind as some kind of guide. But other than that, I think it's very much a journey that you have to take one step at a time and be open-minded. Because, as I said, I think the distance between you and the you of your dreams is great. And you've got to give yourself the space and the chance to grow. And whether that also might include giving yourself the chance to try new things, to discover more about yourself, so that you can sort of like refine who you want to be. But I also don't think it's a solo pursuit. Like, I feel like when I think about who I want to be, there are so many people that inspire me, and that I see qualities in them, and I'm like, I would love to embody that. Like the ambition, the drive that they have, or like their relentless pursuit of just gratitude, for example, like those kind of things, to me, that's all who you want to be. And so, yeah, I don't think it's a solo pursuit. You can look at people who inspire you, but also the people that surround you. I think, like, you know, you uplift each other, and they're a huge part of your journey to becoming the person you want to be, as you are a huge part of their journey too. So yeah, there are many
completely agree.
many factors.
I completely agree. I think you mentioned something fascinating too about like ambition and like, you know, like the goals that you have being different from the person that you aspire to be, because the person you aspire to be is the kind of person, you know, not, you know, we're going to talk, I want to talk about faith a little bit later on too, but it's like to be aspired to be the person that God would give these gifts to, the person who will be the person worthy of these things, you know. I think that's way more about the person you are rather than what you can achieve and what you're able to do and maybe the money you have. That's so very separate from when you look within and when you look at your relationship to something higher than yourself, to something like God, and then you have that question, you have that conversation with yourself. I think when I think these days about who I aspire to be, is very much moving towards that rather than before when I was younger. I was moving towards what can I keep, what can I attain, how many people can I reach, and it's like no, it's actually about what I'm trying to, what the message I'm giving is that aligned with the values that I care about more than is it reaching everyone. And then if it reaches the few people, are they being affected by that? You know, how are they being affected by that? You know, I think it gets me thinking about this idea that I often think about too, about where life is. Like, does life take place within us or does it take place outside of us? Because as a poet, you talk about emotions, we talk about all these things, we write about all these beautiful things. That's an eternal world. But that internal can only happen because of the external world that we live in. So the question I have for you is, does life take place inside of us or does it take place outside of us?
Is it a cop out to say both?
You can say both, but you have to give twice the expression.
Starting with the inner world, I think a big part of life happens inside us because how you perceive things often can influence your experience of life. The external part of life, I think, is so important too, because how you interact with your environment, how you interact with the people around you, like how you interact with nature, even, like all of that kind of stuff. Like you said, it's sort of a two-way thing. Like you respond to what's external to you, but what's external to you evokes an internal response. So I think what's happening inside and what's happening outside happens in tandem. Like I think that they both together make up the experience of life. So life happens on different planes almost, like the physical, the internal in the mind, and also the spiritual too. They all intersect to, yeah.
For life to
take place.
yes, the role, the play that we have of life.
Yeah.
I think the reason that question is always fascinating because it's like, where do you start if you want to change your life, right? Do you start internally? Do you just, you know, say, I'm only going to care about what happens inside of me, not people outside. All of you can wait. It's all about how I feel inside. I'm going to fix that. Or do you stop thinking about yourself and you actually talk to people, go outside, start being in nature, start doing things outside of yourself, you know? I think the answer is, you're right, it's kind of both. But I think it's questions that, where do you start? Where would you start if you had to like put it back together?
Where would I start? I think mindset is really important. I think it shapes the way that you choose to move through life. I think it shapes the way that you perceive things and the choices that you make, and whether you do or do not do something, whether that's for fear or, you know, that kind of thing. So honestly, I would start within, because I think that will, there's a phrase, do you know where I heard it from? I think it's in a song. Wait, not like the
What song it is, right? Depends who's singing.
if you can get your mind out, you can get your body out.
Ooh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
And so when you asked me that question, that is what came to my mind. And so I think it's truth, or at least sometimes true. If you can get your mind out, then your body will follow, and your body being your environment.
Okay. Now I want to shift into, you're talking about the internal world. I want to shift into the internal world of poets. Now, I think you mentioned before, poets have all these different emotions that we go through and you try to express them in different ways. But each emotion plays a different role in our poetry. You mentioned uncertainty and fear play a big role in our poetry, in the current writing. But talk to me also about the role of anxiety, but also like, you could even put them all under an umbrella. So anxiety, fear, uncertainty, these dark aspects of our emotions. What role have they played in your poetry? And a tag-on question to that is that, can we only create from these negative emotions? Is it these negative emotions that fuel our creativity, or have you found that positive emotions can also create just as good?
It's a good question. For me, the emotions like uncertainty and fear, they play a role in my poetry, in that I often use poetry as a way to process things. And so it's quite a cathartic process, actually. And it helps me to have perspective, kind of what I said before as to why I used to make the video recordings when I was younger. It kind of gives me perspective as to what's going on in my mind. So yeah, uncertainty and fear, like they do feature in my poetry, but it's mostly as sort of a way of expressing the emotions to process them. My friend said to me, she was like, you write when you're emotionally charged. And I think that's true for any emotion, though, whether it's like fear, uncertainty, anger, happiness, joy, like that sort of thing. Love. Okay, this romantic and you can't forget about love. But yeah, like I think it's true with any emotion. Anything that gives you inspiration.
Yeah.
I don't think you need to be writing from a place of negativity. I think you can be writing from a place of the most intense elation, or you could even just be writing, maybe you're not really feeling like super emotionally charged. Maybe you're like, that's a really pretty flower. I want to write about how pretty I think it is. It's just like, I don't think that I don't think it's restricted to feeling a certain way. I think it's more about, are you inspired? In whatever in whatever you're feeling, are you inspired? So yeah, I don't think it has to be tied to a certain emotion. For me, a lot of the time it is.
It is, yeah, same. Oh, actually, I had a question. You mentioned inspiration. How do you foster inspiration within yourself? Like, we can't always be inspired, but when you feel that, what do you do to bring that spark back again?
To be honest, like, I did go through quite a long period of time a few months ago where I was like, I have zero inspiration or motivation to write. It was just like, where is it gone? So I did go through a period like that, and I took a step back from writing because I was just like, I have nothing to say. I have nothing to write about. I think I needed that time away, but I would say my biggest inspiration and where I keep coming back to is nature. I think that in nature there are so many truths, and even in just like the process of
So how I was like, oh, it's a podcast version of
I appreciate that. Thank you. No, I think at nature there are so many truths, and even just like the process of, I don't know, metamorphosis, like that process of transformation. Just you could overlay so many truths that we experience in our own lives on just that process alone. I say just that process alone; it's a pretty cool process, but you know what I mean.
right.
And there are so many examples of things that happen in nature where you can do that. So even just like just walking around in nature and letting myself be open to the thoughts that will come in my head or what it could mean, I think it's a huge inspiration for me because it helps me also to contextualize some things in my life. How would you answer that question?
Fascinating question. I think so. I had a word to start when you were speaking about how like I relate to what you're saying about emotions being like the catalyst for writing. I think it's so true. I can almost write when I feel something intense. I can only write when I feel intense emotion, but other side I feel a little intense emotions a lot of the time. So it's like it is helpful. But the way I try to inspire myself when I feel uninspired is to see other people doing really, really, really cool stuff. So that always helps. When I see someone doing really something like poetry event or if it's anything else, if I see them doing it and I can like, I think how my mind works is that it takes meaning from stuff.
Yeah.
So if I see someone do some really cool stuff, I'll interpret it a different way. I'll be like, whoa, that's really cool. It got me thinking about this. And then I think that always is the case for me. It's just that sometimes I block myself from the second thing that I have to do after that, which is pick up and write, which is see what comes off that inspiration, And so it's about learning to do that more, learning to give a little more space between having an idea and being confident or comfortable. It's either like, I'm just going to just see what happens if I take this silly idea and build it out,
Yeah.
And so like a lot of time it's that process of like inspiration is like me watching someone do something cool, like reading your book, it's like, oh my God, that's incredible. Like, like I was reading your book this whole week and that from that came that poem that I showed you because I was like, this is incredible. Like it's going to me, making me think about myself, make me think about my emotions, make me think about how I feel. And then from that, I said, okay, now I'm in a point, but like I need to foster the process even more and see if I can write. But you mentioned also nature. Nature is a great way. I think I love nature. I think, funnily enough, I go to nature to chill, to like not write, but end up writing. So it's like I have like day. I'm like I'm just here.
Can't get away from
that. I'm here to just relax. Oh, that's a nice tree. And it's like when we start writing about whatever the emotions,
I do completely agree with you though about being inspired by what others do. I think that's actually quite a big thing for me as well. Sometimes it's nice to go to poetry events and just listen and not perform and just like take it all in and marvel.
Because when you're not performing, you're not nervous. You're not like, oh my God, what am I going to say? You're just there like, oh, this is amazing.
It's just so inspiring. So no, I do agree with that. The poem you wrote was beautiful, by the way. So
Thank you. Again, it was inspired by yours. But you mentioned something I wanted to touch on too about truth and nature. I think, how do I phrase this question? Okay, so here we go. So nature and truth, I think, is completely true. I think the
is it?
the relationship between those two things, I think, is so interlinked. I think we are part of nature. That's why we can see that. I think a lot also it comes from our ability to recognize patterns, right? We can recognize the pattern of nature because we breathe through it ourselves. We can see it in us. We go, oh, that's interesting. That metamorphosis kind of reminds me of my internal state. And even though the metamorphosis is external, and that's actually the being of the butterfly, we can somehow, what's the opposite of anthropomorphism? I don't know. But, you can do that and then take that emotion and, and internalize it yourself. I think also from that question, I also had a question about poetry, its role in that. Is that a mediator between that for you? Do you think that we use poetry as a way, just like how you're talking about the metamorphosis of like seeing truth in other things? Do you think we use poetry as a way to see truths in other things that happen in life? Whether it goes something we've been through, we can find the words for it. We go, oh my God, this is true. I know it's just true because I felt it and I was able to express it. Or, we can see something external from us and go, that's definitely true because I wrote about it and it sounded very true. What do you think about that?
That's such a good question. The way that I see the relationship between poetry and truth, and then I'll go into with nature.
Yes, please.
I think poetry and truth are very much intertwined because often the root of poetry is authenticity. And that's okay. No, but often the root of poetry is authenticity in it. So I think for every person, it comes from a place of their truth, what's true to them, because they're writing about maybe an experience that they've had, or like you said, an emotion that they've had, or that sort of thing. So it always comes from a place of authenticity. Therefore, by definition, I think it must be true. When it comes to nature, just to clarify your question is that a way for us to find truths in things? Is it a mediator? I think yes. Because I think that the process of writing can help you extract those truths. You can see something and be like, oh, that's cool, or that's a cool process. But then when you really dissect it, and if you do it through the lens of poetry, I think it can reveal certain elements that you might not think of at first, just looking at something. Does that make sense?
Miss Trafford says, yeah, it's like you see something and then it reminds you of something almost, because that thing that you're seeing, I think it's also about the self-awareness of it too, right? It's like you can see yourself watching something. Like we can stick with that example of the metamorphosis, because that's a great example. You see that happening in nature and then you go through your life and then the self-awareness of you going through your life makes that connection with that thing that's happening. You go, oh, like that, like I said, that reminds me of something I've been through. Then you find the words for it. I think that's where poetry is so important. Like, I think that's what poetry acts as the media, because a lot of people feel that feeling but can't find the words. I think we're gifted with words. Too much words. Stop. That's literally sometimes it's like I can say so much, but it's like it's the feeling. It's like a tug of war between how strong the feeling is and how much I can say. And sometimes I lose the words for it, but the feeling is so intense. I think poets have that. And I had a conversation with one of my professors, and he mentioned in it, because I asked him this question too about poetry and truth, and he was like, he's very very tentative about assigning truth to poetry, as if that's the only place you can get truth, because you don't want to put poetry on such a high level about these people are the only people that can access to the truth. The truth exists everywhere, right? But he does, obviously he sees the fact that with poetry we have a tendency to search for truth. We have a tendency to search for things that we feel mean something to us and connect with us, because that's how other people will look at our work, and that's how other people will see that and find that connection there. So I thought that was fascinating. I thought that was really interesting way to lead to define that question.
Yeah, no, that is really, really interesting. And it's true. I think poetry is not the only way to find truth or to search for truth. But I definitely think it's a way that you can, for sure, that you can at least explore and try to find out more about that truth, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
The question I also had was also, as a poet, how do you deal with the things that come with poetry? So I'm talking about the success. I'm talking about the people coming up to you, oh my God, that was amazing. That was incredible. Like, I loved your poem. How do you see or contemplate success as a poet? Do you see it as something to strive for, to try to attain? Or are you looking at it as like, I don't know, because I know what it comes with? How do you look at that relationship?
When you say what it comes with, what do you...
So I think, I guess I mean, like, poetry to me still is an entertainment sphere. So it's like being a musician, right? It's like being a musician, it's like being a rapper. That comes with a lifestyle, that comes with fame, that comes with like people putting up on a pedestal. I don't know if it's a bit different for poetry because apparently poetry doesn't make money. No one told me this. I was looking forward to all the money, and now it's apparently we don't make money, which is a shame. But I guess that's what I mean. Where it comes with, it's still a performing art. It's a performing art comes with audience, member, and artist. Do you think about success? Do you think about how what success would look like for you when you achieve it?
So let's start with the do I think about success? I don't think about success in the terms of like making money or that sort of thing. I think the reason I write poetry is more driven by passion, and that's kind of what makes me keep coming back to it as well. It's just I feel like my mind is wired to see things poetically sometimes. Like, okay, well maybe I should keep doing this. So that is the main driver for me, passion.
Mm-hmm.
With regards to fame, I'm definitely like not famous. Well, who knows? But with regards to like people coming up to you and like saying, oh my goodness, this poem really touched me and all of that, or how I would define success in poetry, I think for me, success is the poem reached somebody, it resonated with somebody. I remember I performed a poem once. It was actually at Morocco Bound.
Oh wow!
And I was leaving early because I had to be somewhere. But anyway, I was leaving early, and just as I left, a lady stopped me by the door and was like, I just wanted to say thank you for your poem. Like, I was having a really difficult week and I decided to come here and just listen as a pick-me-up, and you are the reason that I came. Like, your poem just was exactly what I needed to hear.
That's amazing.
That for me is success. That for me is like, this is my why. Like, yes, it's cathartic for me. Yes, I love it. Yes, I see things poetically. I love writing. But with regards to sharing it, when you can see how it's resonated with somebody else, when someone tells you how personally it's affected them or impacted them, that is just the most gratifying feeling ever, because it's just so nice to know that, because sharing poetry is vulnerable. Like, it's not easy all the time. Like, of course, sometimes I feel really emotional after sharing poems, but it just makes it all worth it when you know that actually is connected with somebody in a way that has uplifted them.
That's so true. I think that's 100% true. I didn't even know that was the right answer. That's perfect, the right answer. Because I was thinking about this a lot myself too, about success and poetry. Because I thought I chose a place where I didn't need to. Because I don't want the fame. I don't want the like the entertainment industry. I don't want the rapper lifestyle. None of that appeals to me. What appeals to me is sharing my work and getting people to feel the work. Like, do you understand what I'm trying to say? Do you understand? Like, I'm just having that conversation with the audience all the time. It's like, I write this thing for me, but like, do you also understand? Do you get it? And like, it's that quest for understanding, I think. And so, but I never saw what the other side of it, which is like how the audience, would interact with your work and how it would make them feel, and I like, like you've said, you do have people coming to you and saying like, this is incredible. And then they'll share something so personal at a moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think obviously it's really nice to hear when people like enjoyed what you performed. But yeah, I think it is when you know that it's reached somebody on a personal level, it's just like, it's amazing. It's amazing. And so yeah, I think for me that's success.
Okay, so let's now talk about, because I wanted to diverge onto another part of poetry that you mentioned that I love, which is love. It's almost like I do this, but it's almost like I'm a poet. I do. I love the reason I'm fascinated by the idea of love in a sense, because it has many different forms. Obviously, there's romantic love, but that's not even the most interesting part. It's self-love. There's like love of neighbor. There's like love of friends. There's like love of family, love of God. All these different things, right, that are captured into this one word. And as poets, I think that's kind of what we do. We look at those things from like different sides. Every single poet talking about love is looking at love from another side, from their specific side. And, it's like from Shakespeare to whoever's going to do it tomorrow, it's all been, talking about the same concepts, talking about the same conversation. So essentially the question I have for you is one of your poems, In Search of Lost Love, which I love, by the way. There's a line that I really like in it, and you go, lost love does not mean love is lost at all. Can you elaborate on that? What do you mean by that? And what does that poem mean to you for you to write?
That whole section is about self-love. And I think one thing that, going back to that line and also that poem, one thing that I lost sight of for quite a long time is that love comes in so many different forms and it manifests itself in so many different ways. And I think, I really struggled with self-love for a long time. There's still a journey that I'm on, to be kinder to myself, like that kind of thing. And so, yeah, I mean, that is also kind of related to romantic love too. That losing that love, but that's. I think it's just, sometimes I have a tendency to be like, to internalize things.
Yes, yeah.
And that can lead to quite a self-deprecating cycle. But when I say lost love does not mean love is lost at all. I think it's just like centering yourself, like reframing your perspective to recognize that actually, even if you feel in some aspect of love, whether that's self-love or another type of love, that it's lost. Mm-hmm. There are so many forms of love. Love of God is just abundant no matter what you're going through. So even though you might feel like you've lost love, just know that you are loved. Just know that there are other forms of love. You've got, even if it's romantic love that you've lost, which I think that poem was about, you've got people around you, you've got other forms of love. And so that's what it meant. It's just, love is so many things. It's not just one thing.
I think that's beautiful. I think that's kind of what I took from it too, which is why I asked the question the way I did. Because I think it is true. I think I tend to focus on romantic love myself. Just because I think maybe I'm just pushing up against the idea that guys don't talk about love. Like I feel that strongly, especially guys from where I'm from. It's like, we have these feelings too. We just don't talk about it. And I was like, oh, I'm going to talk about it because I think it's interesting. I think when I talk about it, it's catharsis. It's like, I can only talk about something that I've already gone over. So if I'm talking about it, it means I have processed it. It means I've thought about it a lot, but also felt like I'm actually comfortable enough to, let it go almost, I think that letting go aspect when it comes to romantic love is so important because it frees me up for next time. It's like, I don't have to be so, if like, I think there's a struggle. I think this is fascinating. I've not thought about this before, but it's for me anyway. There's a struggle when I meet someone when it comes to love because I'm like, I kind of know how this could end. This could end terribly, not terribly. This could be the same thing as last time, or this could be great. And I think I'm more inclined to be like in the middle. Before I was like, unable to let myself understand about the process of letting go. Which is like, if it's now I'm in a place where I'm like, if it's terrible, then it's great because I can also let go. There's that letting go aspect that is embedded into it. If it's great, then it's also great. Then everything turns out fine. But I think, especially in this modern era, when it comes to modern love, there's always that coin you have to flip. But it's always interesting to me to have that conversation with myself. So that's where that process comes from. I think also then nowadays I'm also learning about love of the divine, love of something that's higher than yourself, and letting and that's pure, and that's like really just channeling something. Dean, I was talking to you about before about how now I'm going through like a spiritual phase in my life. I'm writing all these poems, writing more than I've ever written, but I don't understand them. Maybe I'm not the version of myself that understands those poems. I'm the version that writes it. A future version of me look back and be like, okay, I know what you were saying. But it's like, I think even that thought process is me falling, like I said, in one of the ones, the slipstream of a higher power is me allow myself to be taken forward in this version, in this life of mine, by something that knows more than I do about the path forward. So I want to ask you a little bit more also about faith, also, and the role that plays into in your writing. What role has faith played, not just in your life, but also in your writing, and how does it? Because you've got some parts. I mean, the book titles also reference to it. Some parts also here references that love and that seeking and that kind of like destination that you've arrived at. What's that been like?
Faith has played a really big role in my life and in my poetry. I feel like my poetry is an extension of what I'm experiencing, and I completely resonate with what you're saying, in the sense of like sometimes I write something and I'm like, why did I write? Like I don't know what it means. But then, like, I think there's definitely a sort of trust in the process element to that too. But yeah, when it comes to faith, it's quite something to understand, or I don't know if I truly understand, but just to know that there is a higher power that loves you, that has your best interests at heart, that has this amazing plan for your life. And I don't know, it's kind of what you were saying about letting go, like surrendering. I think as humans in general, we all have a tendency to want to control things. And I really, really struggle with letting go because I like having control. I want to know what's going to happen. Like, I don't like surprises. Why would we go in suspense? So, just reveal the path. And so I'm very much, this is the internal, now external, because I've verbalized it. But, this is like the internal, just, I like being in control. I find it quite uncomfortable to not be in control.
Mm-hmm.
But like you were saying about, did you say surrendering to the slipstream?
Yeah.
I think it's important. I think it's important because I do believe that when you really surrender and like step back, you will find that we are guided by something that's higher than ourselves. I do think everything happens for a reason as well. And so I think you just have to trust in that guidance, but it's an active process. It's seeking, like you said. It's like you've got to seek that guidance and trust in that guidance. And I mean, they say faith is the substance of things unseen. And God damn. And I think it's true. I wholeheartedly believe that is true. I think that you will never, ever know for certain where the path will take you. Like, all that we know is what's happened. Like, in our own lives, that's all we know. We don't know what tomorrow will bring. We can make plans, but, plans change or unexpected things happen.
Exactly.
So just having that trust, having that faith in tomorrow, in a tomorrow that you don't know, but just trusting God with it and letting go, it gives you a sense of peace. And I feel like finding that peace was a huge part of my journey in terms of this whole book, essentially. There's a poem right at the beginning, which is like basically me saying, I want to be at peace. And yeah, towards the end of the book, I really just found that peace in my relationship with God. Just knowing that, God's got me. Like he's and so I don't need to worry about anything. There's someone who already knows what my tomorrow looks like. And no matter what it looks like, no matter the trials or difficulties, he's with me. I'm not alone. And so I can trust that even if it's difficult, there's always someone walking with me through the difficulties.
100%.
And there's light at the end of the tunnel.
100%. And this has been amazing. Like I'm still thinking about that line, faith is the substance of all things unseen. Oh my God. I wanted to finish off by asking this last question. I think it's important. I always ask people this question about meaning and life. And I want to kind of tinge your poetry for you and see if obviously you might have two answers to the question. But the first part of the question is obviously, what does a poetic life mean to you? But also, what is the meaning of life? What is life itself? What is the journey that we're going on? What does that mean to you?
I don't know. So I'm going to do my best to answer.
And so you knew. I thought someone finally knew me. I'm drinking.
It's not me. What does a poetic life look like to me? I think poetry is in everything.
Mm-hmm.
But a poetic life, I'm trying to think about how I would define it. The life of a poet, maybe. I think is leaning into that inspiration that drives you. I think you've always got to be open. You've always got to be open-minded and not close yourself off, because inspiration, as I said, comes from all places. Mm-hmm. Poetic life. I think that often poetry, as I said, comes from your own experiences. So a poetic life, I would say, is just not just for a poetic life, but in general, just living life to the fullest that you can. Because, and just try and have the richest experiences, like the most enriching experiences that you can. I feel like that's just such an amazing thing to be able to do that. And with regards to inspiration as well, if you allow yourself to have those experiences, I do think you'll be inspired. In terms of the meaning of life, I'm going to ask you these questions as well, so you could struggle just as much as I am. For fun. In terms of the meaning of life, my faith has a huge part to play in terms of how I interpret that. I think the meaning of life is primarily to know God, to have a relationship with God. I also think everybody has gifts, and exploring those is important. But yeah, I think the meaning of life is founded in relationship with God first and foremost, and with others. I think it's less about material things. I think it's important to be, I think it's great to be ambitious and go after what you want. Obviously, I think that to make something of yourself, for sure, but I don't think that that's the meaning. I know you're a hopeless romantic. They'll probably love it when I say this, but I think love is one of the most fundamental parts of life that we're so blessed to experience. I think I think the meaning of life is rooted in relationship relationship with God, relationship with others. What do you think? So firstly, what do you think is the poetic life?
Yes.
And what do you think is the meaning of life?
First off, your answers are amazing, by the way. These are incredible. I was listening very intently because at some point I began to relate to what you were saying. I think my journey is very similar to yours. So to hear you, that's the answers you found, it gives me some comfort. First, for the meaning of life first, I'm going to take something to steal your answer there. I think it's 100% true. I think I discovered that recently too. I've always known it. I've always been in a very religious family. But I guess the thirst for knowledge and understanding has led me to try and understand everything about the world. And I come right back to where I started, which is the understanding of God and understanding of scripture, especially understanding the wisdom that's there, but also knowing God and having a relationship. I think you mentioned that that's super important. I think that is the meaning of life, because I think everything else springs out from that. If you have everything in the world, but you lose your relationship with God, I think you're for a very, very difficult time. I think I've seen a lot of people, a lot of ambitious people go on that path and that journey for ambition, and they lose that relationship to God or themselves. I think, again, that it's the same thing, right? Like, you lose a relationship to God, it means you lost a relationship to yourself, it means you lost a relationship to your family, because that's the only way to keep all those things in sequence. I think that's a truth that we found in the world. So I think it's kind of my goal to rediscover that in my life, even with all these things around me, still rediscover that relationship. A poetic life, I think the reason I asked that is funny too, because I think there is a way of being for a poet. There's almost, you have to live differently to everyone else. You have to look at things differently. You walking on the street and seeing birds flying, thinking of a sonnet in your head. Like, you can't go out to some random stranger and be like, did you also do that? Because they don't care about stuff like that. I think that's kind of what it means to always have that kind of childlike wonder about the world. That
I like
kind
that
of like
childlike wonder. Yeah.
looking at things and just seeing it for what they are, and then letting yourself stay curious, even far into the future. I think that's kind of what we're trying to hold on to. Just like, just be like, oh, like I'm still myself. I think that's what I mean, the poetic life. You still try to find that connection to yourself. I'll be able to obviously verbalize it. I hope I never lose the ability to, to verbalize it and write it down. But also just even the feeling of it first off. Just having the feeling, being able to look at something and be like, that reminds me of the, the cocoon story you talked about. That reminds me of this thing going on in my life. And then, taking that process and, I also want to write. I also want to write books. I'm not there yet, but I hope I get there one day. I want to be able to write books and share that with people and see if they relate to that. I think that's kind of what it is about. You were right. It's about relationships in different factors, in different medias, in different ways. And so thank you also for this conversation, because this has been a poetic conversation. So
I really like your answers as well. To the poetic life one as well. I think, yeah, childlike wonder, curiosity, those are such fundamental things
100%.
to keep. Yeah, just in all that you do, really. So I like your answer better than mine.
No, I like yours way better than mine. Like I'll say, I basically worked on your answer to make, so I copied your homework and just handed it in probably. But thank you so much for this conversation. You're incredible. I think your book is incredible. Honestly, people should go and check it out. Poets and non-poets alike, because it's just, like I said at the beginning of the episode, it's one of those things that make you realize about the beauty of life. And even though you talked about some, real stuff in there, about you going through things, you can relate. I think poets can relate, people can relate. I think the fact that this exists in the world makes the world a better place. So thank you. It's true. It is true, though. It's true. It is. So thank you for having the courage to put yourself out there like this. Thank you for living that poetic life and having that kind of ability that you have with words to describe these feelings for us, because without it, then we'll just be lost. So thank you very much for today.
Thank you. And this has been a wonderful conversation, Jeoffrey. So thank you so much. And again, thank you so much for inviting me on here. It's been such a pleasure. And yeah, you're also great.
Thank you. I'm also great. Did you hear that, Mom? Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Guys, thank you so much again. Until next time, guys. Peace. Bye.